there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Here is end-time newsman Rick Wiles.
Welcome to True News for Friday, May 5th, 2017. Financial analyst Jim Willie is standing by to join the program. We're going to devote today's program to the state of the world economy. First, however, I want to briefly cover some very important news items from the Middle East and Asia. At the close of yesterday's program, I mentioned that Russia had proposed dividing Syria into 4 zones and that Gazprom was ordered by Mr. Putin to start installing pipes for the Turkish stream. We said at the close of yesterday's program that both announcements were evidence that something big was in the works. Well, today we know what was in the works. Russia, Iran, and Turkey today imposed a no-fly zone over Syria and ordered the United States of America to keep its military aircraft from flying over those zones. The no-fly zone was announced by Russian diplomat Alexander Lavrentiev. He said, quote, "From this time forward, these zones are closed for their flights, with or without notification," end of quote. Syria is not a signatory to the no-fly zone agreement. So far, there hasn't been any response from Washington. The announcement means that Iran, Turkey, and Russia are prepared to shoot down American and Israeli warplanes bombing targets in Syria. Even more troubling for the West is Turkey's membership in NATO. A high-ranking Turkish government official warned earlier this week that Turkish missiles may accidentally kill some American troops in Syria. The plan, announced today, received verbal support.
And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Here is end-time newsman Rick Wiles.
Welcome to True News for Friday, May 5th, 2017. Financial analyst Jim Willie is standing by to join the program. We're going to devote today's program to the state of the world economy. First, however, I want to briefly cover some very important news items from the Middle East and Asia. At the close of yesterday's program, I mentioned that Russia had proposed dividing Syria into 4 zones and that Gazprom was ordered by Mr. Putin to start installing pipes for the Turkish stream. We said at the close of yesterday's program that both announcements were evidence that something big was in the works. Well, today we know what was in the works. Russia, Iran, and Turkey today imposed a no-fly zone over Syria and ordered the United States of America to keep its military aircraft from flying over those zones. The no-fly zone was announced by Russian diplomat Alexander Lavrentiev. He said, quote, "From this time forward, these zones are closed for their flights, with or without notification," end of quote. Syria is not a signatory to the no-fly zone agreement. So far, there hasn't been any response from Washington. The announcement means that Iran, Turkey, and Russia are prepared to shoot down American and Israeli warplanes bombing targets in Syria. Even more troubling for the West is Turkey's membership in NATO. A high-ranking Turkish government official warned earlier this week that Turkish missiles may accidentally kill some American troops in Syria. The plan, announced today, received verbal support from Staffan de Mistura, the United Nations envoy assigned to Syria. He called the no-fly zone plan, quote, "an important, promising, positive step in the right direction," end of quote. More bad news for the West today came from Tehran. Iran announced plans to bolster the number of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps troops stationed inside Syria. On the Korean Peninsula, North Korea threatened to attack the intelligence agencies of the USA and South Korea. North Korea's Ministry of State Security claimed that a terrorist group backed by the CIA has infiltrated North Korea for the purpose of assassinating Kim Jong-un by using a deadly biochemical substance. The Communist North Korea news agency said, quote, "We will ferret out and mercilessly destroy to the last one the terrorists of the U.S., CIA, and South Korea's National Intelligence Service, targeting the dignity of the DPRK supreme leadership." They went on to say, Korean-style anti-terrorist attack will be commenced from this moment to sweep away the intelligence and plot-breeding organizations of the U.S. imperialists and the puppet clique, end of quote. Communist dictator Kim Jong-un inspected his military detachments on 2 islands off the southwest front today. He said North Korea is considering a plan to attack South Korea. Communist Korea's news agency, KCNA, said Kim looked at a South Korean island from an observation point and called for combat readiness against South Korea. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army is relocating the U.S. 8th Army away from the U.S. garrison at Yongsan. American military leaders recently held a ceremony at the U.S. base to honor the late General Walton H. Walker, a Korean War hero who commanded American troops at the Busan perimeter and prepared the way for General Douglas MacArthur's amphibious landing. General Walker was killed in Korea in 1950. A 10-foot statue of the U.S. general was transported to Camp Humphreys, a refurbished U.S. base south of Seoul. Presumably, the 8th Army is being relocated to a safer region south of the DMZ. The relocation plan is expected to be completed by late June, and a dedication ceremony at Camp Humphreys is scheduled for July 13. The April 25 statue ceremony was attended by 95-year-old Paik Sun-yup, a retired South Korean Army general who served alongside General Walton Walker in the Korean War. Mr. Henry Cooper, former director of the Strategic Defense Initiative Missile Defense Program, told the U.S. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources on Thursday that Iran and North Korea could strike North America with an EMP blast. He said, quote, "Both nations could deliver an EMP attack on the United States by simply detonating a nuclear weapon carried by one of their satellites as it passes over the United States," end of quote. He said the EMP weapon would require no hardened re-entry vehicle or accurate guidance system, as with an ICBM. Moreover, both Iran and North Korea have successfully launched satellites into orbit, he said. And Fox News reported today that the Pentagon is examining Iranian-North Korean military cooperation projects, including ICBM rockets and nuclear warheads. Okay, that's enough World War III news. Our topic today is the state of the world economy, but I don't think you can talk about the economy without talking about World War. Both topics are connected. Let's bring financial analyst and newsletter author and publisher Jim Willie into the discussion. He's the publisher of the Hat Trick Letter. You can subscribe at goldenjackass.com. Jim, this has got to be the strangest times that I've seen since you and I have had radio interviews.
Yes, it is. Let me start off with a rather sassy and petulant comment. If you had ignored North Korea for the last 25 years, all the noise, all the news, all the bluster, all the threats, all the news reports about threats, which half of which are lies, if you had ignored it for 25 years, Rick, you never would have missed a thing. And that's what I do with North Korea now. I ignore it, and I never miss a thing.
Explain it. What do you mean by that?
It's all noise. It's all U.S. versus China sideshow. It's all saber rattling that goes away in 3 months and makes you look intellectually silly. I pay no attention to North Korea, and I never miss a thing.
Well, we know that as late as just a few months ago, Western nations such as Great Britain were continuing to send money to North Korea.
Well, that's what we're told. Is the news tending to be full of lies?
Jim, do you think that the West is stoking this North Korean tension red hot as a cover to install the THAAD anti-missile system in South Korea?
Well, maybe so, but what makes you think that the THAAD missile system is potent? Because the U.S. says so?
No, not that it's potent. It's expensive.
Well, maybe it's expensive, but not too much in the newest, latest, and greatest of U.S. military hardware.
But, Jim, if you're an investor in the fascist business model...
Oh, to be sure. Don't get me wrong, I understand very well the cost and spending and the diversion, including into big pharma. Here's what's going on in North Korea, in my opinion. This is ugly stuff, and you're not going to see it in the news because the people who control the news are the ones in control of the crime syndicate. North Korea is beginning to compete against the Bush crime family in the heroin business. Do I need to say any more?
That's your decision. You've got the microphone.
Okay. They've also expanded in a huge way their amphetamine black market output and participation. I've been reading also that they've got significant gold and copper deposits. There's been a lot of talk about reunification of the Koreas, much like in Germany 10 to 15 years ago. Okay, I don't think the North Koreans want that because they're running a dictatorship and they're having a rather cozy life, privileged at the expense of their public. But I think we're seeing a lot of distraction with both Iran and North Korea, and I largely ignore both because both are full of noise, both are full of lies, both are full of nonsense, both seem to fade away after 3 months to make you seem intellectually silly, which I am not. Iran is significant not for its military buildup so much as for its participation with China and Russia as an integral new part in the Eurasian trade zone. Iran does have a role in the war in Syria, and Iran does have a role in the war in Yemen. But what I like to point to is the fact that we're in a very late stage here, Pastor Rick. The dollar does not have, I like to refer to it as the king dollar throne. It has 4 legs, and I'm not sure, but I think it's got only one leg left, and that's war. The bond fraud is gone. That's exposed and weakened. The petrodollar is now exposed and weakened and broken, and the economy, the U.S. economy, is broken and exposed and weakened. The only thing left is war. We had the Iraq war, the Afghan war, the Ukraine war, the Syrian war, now the Iranian threat, North Korean threat, and the ongoing Yemen war. And very few Americans, I think, can even point to Yemen on the map or relay the information that it controls the opposite side of Djibouti in the Gulf of Aden, which controls the Suez Canal. But I can point to that because I'm well aware of what the Yemen war is. It's not just control of access to the Suez Canal. Saudi Arabia has been depleted of its oil reserves, and they're trying to steal their neighbors' oil and gas reserves, their neighbor on the same Arabian Peninsula in the backward primitive nation called Yemen. And it's not going to work. The main reason it's not going to work is that the Saudis have allied with the United States. All the allies to the United States end up becoming depleted, bankrupted, and ruined. And this is no different. So, we're in a situation now where there are a lot of distractions. If we have enough distractions with Iran and Russia and North Korea and Chinese trade stealing American jobs, what a moronic thing for Trump to say. Is he unaware that between 2001 and 2004, there was $23 billion in foreign direct investments from U.S. and Canadian businesses, corporations in China? Did he forget outsourcing and all that climax? No. Golly, it's so incredibly dumb what's going on with U.S. foreign policy, economic policy, monetary policy, everything policy. But the U.S. and Europe are now intentionally sabotaged and weakened, and now cannot stand up to Russia and China coming forward with the gold standard, working behind the Eurasian trade zone and the Belt and Road. U.S. cannot stand up to this.
Jim, what's your reaction to this no-fly zone announcement today over Syria?
It's, I believe, to expose the United States and Israel as the aggressors. If they violate it, they will be known as being in violation. If they're shot down, the United Nations might even say that they violated the no-fly zone. Although the United Nations is a bit of a farce organization, extension of the Rothschilds and Rockefellers. The big item in this story is Turkey. You mentioned it. You mentioned that Turkish, officials made a statement that it's possible that the Turkish artillery and, surface air missiles might shoot down some American assets.
Well, no, they actually said some of their missiles may accidentally kill American soldiers.
Oh, soldiers. Okay. All right. But it'll be soldiers' lives and military assets, I guarantee you, because the United States cares more about its equipment than it does its men.
Well, what's NATO going to do with a rogue member?
Well, I think you're seeing pretty much already what they're doing. They're trying to cordon them off, isolate them. And what I heard from my Cato contact, the U.S. military and security agency intel guy, Cato said that we moved all our nukes out of Incirlik, Turkey, and moved them to Germany and Italy and other points. But Germany and Italy are the two closest areas. Italy is very close to Turkey.
Well, Israel's Debka file was promoting the story that Incirlik was being relocated to Syria.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty funny. Whenever I see a news story, Rick, I start off with an assumption that it's 90% a lie. And then I move, based on the evidence, away from my starting point of 90% lie. And what I find is something remarkable. I don't move very far from that 90% mark of lie. So they're not going to move Jack into Syria to make a new Air Force base. They're not going to move Jack. What we're going to see is Turkey become a Russian satellite. And Turkey is going to rent the Incirlik Air Force Base to the Russian military.
And that's what we said a year ago.
Yeah, well, it's starting to happen, and the failed coup cemented that. But
Russia is also selling the S-400 to Turkey. So you're going to have a NATO member purchasing S-400 air defense system from Russia to shoot down NATO planes.
I know. What it means to me is that Turkey is not any longer NATO, nor has it been for 6 months. I mean, I don't care about what the news says that Turkey is still a NATO member. I don't care about the news.
That ended when Turkey closed down Incirlik last year.
Well, it ended when they had the failed attempt for a coup by the U.S. and NATO forces on Incirlik. After that, Incirlik got quarantined, got stripped of all its nuclear assets, I'm not sure, but I think at least half of their aircraft moved away. So what is Incirlik? It's real estate. And I think it's going to be rented to the Russian military. Now, yeah, they've got S-400 missiles that I don't think they're installed yet. I think they're under contract, and they're working now to negotiate all the different support mechanisms, because the Turks, I hate to say these things generally, but the Turks are dumb. They don't have the technical expertise to manage their own systems. Anyone who operates something complicated on military equipment is really kind of a hybrid who maybe spent half of his military career in Germany under training. They don't know how to do anything. They don't know how to make their own aspirin or fabricate their own underwear. Okay? I'm very plain about this. The Muslims and the Arabs are the dumbest societies technologically. It's the only religion that is anti-knowledge. They don't know how to do aspirins. They don't know how to make shoes. They don't know how to make anything. They buy their rifles, and after they acquire their weapons, this is something that the Saudis have been very careful about. After they acquired their military weaponry, they actually had their own people staff all the weapons systems. They didn't have too many mercenaries in there, because the mercenaries really don't fight loyally and support the king or whatever it is. We're going to see every Arab oil monarchy fall, every single one. The only one that has a chance of restoring itself and reshaping itself is Oman, for their healthy relationship with Russia, China, and Iran. All the rest regard Iran as an enemy, and it's a very simple litmus test. If an Arab monarchy opposes in a fierce way Iran, it is going to fall.
Jim, there's an article today on oilprice.com written by Cyril Wittershoven, and it's titled "Saudi Power Struggle Could Destabilize the Entire Middle East." Is the Saudi system crumbling right now?
It started crumbling 2 years ago. It's been crumbling at an accelerating rate in the last year. We had a joke of an event happen about 2 months ago when King Salman went to Russia to sign certain energy accords. And what happened was King Salman had to be replaced with a double, because the real King Salman is suffering from severe dementia and cannot hold a pen. So who showed up to represent the Saudis but a double for their king, along with their prince, Mohammed bin Salman, who really holds all the power and has a fun hobby of executing a Yemen war. So you've got to break down of the petrodollar that began in about 2013 or 14. There's really not much left of it now, and there's a really sickening aspect to it. The TIC report, the Treasury International Capital Report, it's supposed to be an official report on the U.S. Treasury bond holdings of foreign countries and central banks. But if you look at the last 20 years, you'll see that the Saudis were never a line item. They're always OPEC nations. And that was to obscure the fact that the Saudis had most of their treasury bonds locked in the Exchange Stabilization Fund in Wall Street and Washington, supporting the treasury bond complex. Well, that $3 to $4 trillion is being stolen. So I don't think the Saudis are going to be very loyal to the United States when we're stealing their core treasury holdings. And now we got this new line item of Saudi Arabia in the TIC report, and it shows something absurd like $150 or $170 billion worth of treasuries. And they're trying to make a big deal about the gradual decline of the Saudi U.S. Treasury holdings in the last 3 years. Well, shouldn't it have peaked at about 3,000 or 4,000 billion, like $3 or $4 trillion? We're talking about 40 years of the biggest exporter in the world, and all they got to show for it is $150 lousy billion. I don't think so. So they're not going to be loyal to the United States, and I think you're going to see an event real soon. It's a little bit slow in developing, but I think the Saudis are going to make a statement before too long. Could be a couple months, could be 4 months, could be 1 month. I don't know.
Like what?
Timing is very difficult. They're going to accept from the Chinese RMB in oil sales, and that will be the official death of the Treasury bill payment system called the Petrodollar.
President Trump and Jared Kushner are going to Riyadh in about 2 weeks. You have any inside information why they're traveling to Riyadh?
Probably arms deals, probably heroin deals, because that's a main outpost for the Bush crime family. Probably more secret deals for ISIS replenishment in arms. Probably some deals regarding all the dead Saudi soldiers fighting for ISIS. It could be to prevent a Saudi cutoff of ISIS. I mean, it's a very unholy alliance between Israel, ISIS, and the Saudis, along with the UAE, United Arab Emirates. This is very ugly stuff. I love telling a little side story that Jeb Bush was running for president. What a joke that would have been. And suddenly he complained that Donald Trump criticized his mommy, Mother Bush. But Jeb Bush came across as being kind of a wormy little kid and didn't want to tell the real story of what was going on. And that was the Russians were cutting off the Saudi ISIS narcotics payment system. And the Saudi Bush connection to the Jeb Bush campaign was severed, and he had to quit his presidential run because he ran out of narcotics money. These systems are all dirty, Rick. And if we're going to have Kushner, I mean, he's like Rasputin. I think he's a disgusting figure, the personal advisor to the Trump administration. Let me just point out one little sickening detail. Kushner has a brand new inaugurated building in South Manhattan. Maybe it's Central Manhattan. It's largely glass. It's round. And he could have picked any address he wanted, but he chose 666.
Keep going.
I think we've got a satanic Mossad connection in the Trump cabinet team of advisors. You cannot read a story about Trump without the word flip-flops in the last month.
Jim, what's your take on the Trump flip-flops? Did he deceive the voters all along, or when he got into the White House, was he compromised, and was there a coup that was carried out by the dark state?
This is a very delicate area and a very difficult area to fully comprehend. This is how I like to describe it, because I don't have full knowledge. Like many of us, I have to deal with all the lies and decipher and interpret everything. I do have some insider sources, and to be honest, some of them have been confused. At the start, it looked as though the Trump Power Center, I did not say cabinet, the Trump Power Center was to be offline somewhat. Like, as in, we heard the phrase shadow cabinet. Okay, then Flynn, National Security Advisor, was pushed out. I was told that he wasn't out at all. Instead, he was working at a superstructure security post that oversaw 13,000 security private agencies and companies in the United States. And his new job was to trap Obama in sedition, treason, and inciting to riot in order to quiet all that down. Then we heard about how Bannon got removed in favor of Kushner, but in the last week, Bannon was mentioned by Trump as he's not going anywhere. He never left. Okay, so he's part of a shadow team. I believe what happened is that Trump made some promises that he couldn't keep to the public, the populist promises of cleaning the swamp, draining the swamp. I think, to be honest, I think Trump has one leg in the swamp and is kind of a hybrid swamp creature. Remember that he recovered from 2 or 3 bankruptcies, which means that some of his best buddies are bankers. Remember that his campaign was aided and abetted in a huge way by the Pentagon by blocking the Hillary and the Democrat Party voter fraud, which was utterly massive, like something on the order of 7 million fraudulent votes for Hillary, which means that the margin of victory should have been something like 4 to 6%, not half of 1% for Trump. So by the time he got into office...
Can you go back? What do you mean, the Pentagon?
Oh, gosh, America First. That's not an economic theme. That's a Pentagon theme. That's the 500 generals who were dismissed by Clinton, Bush, and Obama. 500 generals and admirals who were all dismissed because they wanted to defend the Constitution and would not salute the narco barons. So America First got their imprint out there on Election Day and prevented the election fraud, the voter fraud. They prevented a lot of high level, I like to call it macro voter fraud. It doesn't really matter what the precincts voted. When they added them up, that's when they rejiggered the numbers so that the sum for the state did not add up from all the component precincts. And there would have been controversy, and then there would have been silenced. But the Pentagon blocked all that with some good allies in the FBI and the Federal Election Commission. The software from Diebold was turned off. What I heard was they were going to count every Trump vote as 0.3 and count every Hillary vote as 1.6 on a weighting system from the precinct level to make the aggregate state count. And the Pentagon blocked that along with the FBI, the America First. Notice how many times Trump mentioned America First during his inauguration speech. I think it was about 8 or 10 times. It's a military group. It's not an economic theme.
All right, Jim, on election night, Donald Trump was winning the electoral votes. The television news networks wouldn't report it. And then somewhere around midnight, the vote tally just stopped. It just froze. I actually took a little nap in there till about 2 a.m. somewhere. Nothing happened for several hours. I did make some phone calls to people, and there was a feeling I had. It's just a feeling during that 2-hour period that something very sinister was taking place, and that there was a power struggle underway at that very moment between two groups fighting over whether the vote would be rigged. And that,
Yes.
that was the feeling I had. Somebody just stopped it from happening. And
I had the same feeling, Rick.
but
I'm agreeing with you.
I also think that group of generals was on the phone to Donald Trump between midnight and 2 a.m. and said, it's time to make a deal. We get X many seats on your cabinet.
There might have been some very high-level jinx brinkmanship going on after midnight Eastern time on election night. I agree completely. And it's not just military seats, it's Goldman Sachs seats. And Jared Kushner's got Goldman Sachs connections along with Mossad connections, along with satanic connections.
Hey, speaking of satanic connections, have you seen the video that's circulating on the internet featuring the Dutch banker who told a Dutch documentary filmmaker that over his 25-year banking career, he was eventually introduced to Church of Satan rituals, and then that at first he just laughed at it, dismissed it, but then eventually he was told that he had to participate in a child sacrifice, and the man broke down on the video. You could tell the guy was emotionally troubled, that this was not he wasn't acting. I didn't feel anything in me that this man was faking. This was a hoax. Have you seen this video yet?
No, I haven't, but what you saw is very prevalent and not an isolated case. In fact, the Queen Lizard is reported to have recently died like the last day or two. Queen of England, I call her the Queen Lizard.
Is that why they had the emergency meeting at Buckingham Palace?
Yes, and the word will come out soon, but I mean, I'm not 100% sure of it, but I believe the Queen Lizard is dead.
The cover story is that the Duke of Edinburgh retired, but that sounded unusual. Why an emergency meeting? Why were the Queen's personal staff from throughout the nation called to quickly get to Buckingham Palace?
I think the Duke made his announcement because he wanted to get out of Dodge. The Satanists are on the run. The Queen Lizard is a Satanist. There are lots and lots of missing children at Buckingham Palace from the tours. Diana was killed, I mean murdered, because she was on the verge of revealing some of the Satanism and some of the lizard stuff. These are very sick people, and they're not all human. But something very big is going on because Rockefeller's dead. It looks like the Queen Lizard is dead. And we might have a movement where the protection at a high level from exposure of the Satanists is going away. And there are a couple more key members who might possibly find their spot 6 to 10 feet under, and that's Bill Clinton and Papa Bush. I believe Bill Clinton is far more sick and at death's door than Papa Bush, who's got something like a kidney infection. You know, at the age of 93 or 4, that can be very serious from the consequences, and it's like a chain reaction that gets out of control, and looks like we can't save him. One thing led to another. But Bill Clinton, I think, is dying from some form of very advanced venereal disease. I hear about syphilis, but there could be something far more oh gosh, I don't want to get into the topic of cannibalism, Pastor Rick, but these people are really, really sick. I mean, mentally deranged and very far gone as to the norms of society. And there are some mental diseases that are very pernicious that seem to happen from cannibalism. And it could be that Bill Clinton has got a little bit of that. And so did Hillary, who I believe is dead.
You do?
Yeah, I think she's dead. I think on 9/11, she had a very serious incident and did not recover from it. And that woman on the third debate, if you think that was Hillary, you got rocks in your head, you got nothing in your head. That was a 45 to 50-year-old woman posing as a wrinkled 70-year-old Hillary? Are you kidding me? I'm not stupid. The third debate was a woman, give or take 50 years old, with a very tight voice match. We're being played. And by the way, where's the Obama family? Where's this man bride, Michael? Is he still at his husband's side? And did the two children have to be returned to their former owners in Morocco? We're being played.
Well, we know Obama fled the country immediately after the election. And he went to a French Polynesian island for an indefinite stay by himself, is what the French news report said.
Well, a gay man hotel. I believe the move, Rick, was not after Election Day or Inauguration Day. The move was after the capture of the Lady Michelle vessel in Saint Croix.
Yes.
Santa Cruz, the Caribbean island near the something of the Grenadines.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
St. Vincent of the Grenadines, the Queen Lizard's little play island. But it had 4.2 tons of cocaine on it, and Obama made a hasty move out of the country by way of Omaha. And if what people are wondering, why on earth would Obama go visit Warren Buffett? The answer is simple. Buffett is a very major narco trafficker. But a deal was cut because Obama's back. He went to the Art Rooney Pittsburgh Steelers owner funeral in Pittsburgh. That was kind of his coming out party.
He came back after there was this change in Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think some deals were struck. You're on the right track, I believe. I don't have all the answers, Rick, but it looks like a deal was struck where maybe Obama allowed his little Arab gay buddies on the ship to go down as owners and traffickers of the 4.2 tons of coke. He probably had to sell out his friends in order to regain his entry rights into the U.S., which, I don't know, does it still include all the speaker gigs, or is that over with?
Hey, speaking of his gay Arab buddies, there's a new biography book out this week. I saw a photograph of a young Obama sitting with one of his Islamic heroin buddies, and there was also a photo of one of his college professors who introduced him to homosexuality. But the college professor, the photo was him in the White House, in the Oval Office, talking to Obama as president.
Yeah, well.
What's new, right? What's new?
Contaminated White House, do we not? I mean, this is so sickening, Rick, that I can honestly say with conviction that we need a decade to clean it, and I'm not sure we've even begun. The Voice countered an opinion that Cato put out about a year ago. Cato said, Jim, I'm giving you this from the NSA at the top. They believe a dual universe is coming where the West, like Western Europe, England, and North America, and maybe most of South America, they're going to be dollar-based, dollar sphere for banking and trade. But the East is going to be gold-backed and RMB-backed, and maybe the RMB will be a caretaker, the Chinese currency, and then eventually there might be some kind of a transition from RMB gold backing to the gold trade node interchange. Anyway, the East is going to be the gold sphere, and the West will be the dollar sphere, and the two will coexist. And the voice said, well, that sounds all very nice, sounds all very clean, sounds all very organized, but the dollar cannot compete with gold. The dollar will fail in a dual universe. And I think that's what we're starting to see, because in the last week, the economic advisor for the Russian government, a fellow named Glaziev, came out and said, basically, I don't want to read the quote, I'm going to give you a paraphrase. He basically said, we're seeing U.S. military aggression that's getting out of control and getting rather broad-based, and the only way to defuse it and to bring it, to the curb will be to eliminate the dollar's power centers. And that's where I think the next big moves are going to come. It's going to be, I've been saying this for the longest time. The gold standard will arrive with the trade payment system, with banking reserve systems, and with gold-backed currencies. And there's a nice growing list. If you go West versus East, one item after another, they're giant platforms, they're banking office agencies, they're trading systems, they're organizations. But on one side, you've got the Federal Reserve as a central bank, and on the other, you've got the People's Bank of China. On the West, you've got the International Monetary Fund, and in the East, you have the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. In the West, you've got the World Bank, but in the East, you've got the BRICS Bank. In the West, you've got SWIFT bank transactions, but in the East, you've got CIPS, the cross-border interbank payment system, is sometimes called the Chinese interbank payment system, but also the Russian payment system. In the West, you've got the LBMA for gold and the COMEX, but in the East, you've got the Shanghai Gold Exchange. And it extends beyond those platforms, and those 5 platforms are very significant and indicate that the dollar is not the monopoly anymore. It has to share this dual universe. The other organizations are, the West has NATO, which we're seeing a little splinter of right now with Turkey, and the East has the Shanghai Co-op Organization, SCO. The West has Standard & Poor, Moody's, and Fitch for debt rating agencies, but the East has Daegong and the ACRA. The West has MasterCard, Visa, and American Express for credit cards, but the East has UnionPay, which is bigger than MasterCard and Visa combined. They also have the JCB, which is not Chinese or Russian, but it's Japanese. And I think you're going to see the JCB much more widely used in Southeast Asia. So we've got a paradigm shift in progress, Rick, and it's not stoppable. And when the U.S. begins the process of saying, we will accept this dual universe, you can start the clock, because the dollar will not have much time left, because the dollar cannot compete with gold. You can't have QE and this unlimited bond monetization program going on in the United States, in Europe, and in Japan to support a dollar-based monetary system, to support the king dollar. You can't, with hyper monetary inflation, create a solid foundation. That's one of the missing legs of the king dollar throne. It's got only one leg left, and that's military. It cannot compete against gold, Rick. And that is where we're coming now. We're rounding a bend, moving toward a dual universe where the dollar cannot be sustained. And it's exciting. The problem is that the fascists and the banker cabals, these are globalist, fascist, vicious genocide kings, full of narcotics, including the Queen Lizard and Langley. Afghanistan has 1,300 tons of heroin produced a year, shipped to Kosovo and then to the NATO air bases. This is what's supporting. I have a new line. It's not a joke, but heroin and cocaine, narcotics, are the lubricant for establishing the global fascist state, the New World Order. And it's being used also with the smaller nations. I don't want to mention individual countries, but there are a number of small nations that are told, if you assist us with the narco money trafficking, money laundering, and I suppose the narco trafficking, use your Air Force base, and Costa Rica has got the Liberian U.S. military Air Force base. What do you think's going on there? They don't just abduct and send out 8 Americans per day in the Liberia Air Force Base in Costa Rica. I think there's a little bit of movement of the stuff. But the United States uses narcotics money laundering to get countries to promise to remain within the dollar sphere in return for a cut. And the cut is 10, 15, 20% of the money moved. You can support currencies that way.
Jim, what's going on in India regarding their rapid move toward a cashless society?
Boy, I wish I knew, Rick. We're left to guess, and I can come up with some, bright guesses, intelligent conjecture, whatever you want to call it. But Modi is putting his life on the line as prime minister, being pretty much the London boy. First, he had the monetization of temple gold. That was not very successful. In fact, it was called a dismal failure by many, because I believe all it brought in was something like 30 tons. By that I mean temples could say, well, we have a ton of gold, we're going to bring it to the banks and we're going to earn some interest on it, and it'll enter into the banking system for reserve purposes, and I trust my government to do the right thing. Well, good luck ever seeing that again. So they will have perpetual interest-bearing gold bonds. Okay, he moved from that failure to cashless society with ATM limitations on cash dispersals, and it seemed like the farther you got away from the Delhi, I don't know how you exactly pronounce Delhi. The farther you got away from Delhi, the more shortages there were. So he's trying to protect his core center by not aggravating them too much with shortage of cash. But what he's done is he caused tremendous damage in lots and lots of industries that were pretty much cash operations. The word I hear from Euroraj, now, I don't want to give away the identity of Euroraj, but let's just say that he knows a lot about India, Turkey, and Iran. He's got family scattered around there. He grew up in that general area. He still has family. He still has contacts. And what he said was, India is dealing with a very dangerous problem, and that is Pakistanis moving in cash to buy weapons and explosives to deal with terrorism events, to foment terrorism events. Pakistani element with not counterfeit money, with just smuggled cash. Maybe there's some counterfeit money. I don't think that's the big issue. I think it's smuggled cash. But they're buying weapons, they're buying explosives, and they're blowing things up. Pakistanis are Muslims and Indians are largely Hindu. They do not mix. Oh boy, it's very ugly stuff. But the move by Modi prime minister, to limit the cash movement was to stop as best he could the arms purchasing by the Pakistani dangerous infusion. And I don't know how successful it is, but I do know that the side effect, unintended, was to do harm to the gold trade. And I think they wanted to slow down the smuggling of gold, but what they did was they slowed down the entire gold trade, the jewelry trade, the movement of savings little bars, like 5-ounce bars, little bars, and maybe even fractions of an ounce, little bars, little coins. The savings in the Indian household in gold terms is on the order of 15 to 20,000 tons. Westerners just cannot wrap their heads around that. Okay, Modi has interfered with the gold smuggling. Modi has interfered with the Pakistani weapons procurement. Modi has interfered with the cash operation commerce, the underground markets. I don't like necessarily the name of black market, because sometimes an underground market is very legitimate and they just don't pay taxes on sales. I think Modi's going to end up dead. I don't know how long it's going to take, but if he's going to be the London banker's boy and lackey, he better be careful. They have a history. They killed Nehru. They killed Gandhi. They killed their own. There are so many factions inside India. It deserves the name, the subcontinent. It's like a group of countries. They've got about 200 dialects inside India. It's crazy. It's overpopulated. They don't have a great value on life. They burn at the stake women that they want to reject, not so much for infidelity, but they just don't want them anymore, so they burn them to death. This is a very strange culture in this country, and I think they're going to find a way to remove Modi one way or another. But that's my view of India, and bear in mind, Rick, that I got a lot of holes in there, a lot of missing information. This is a story that's not over with, but the gold trade is coming back in a fierce way.
Hey, Jim, in last March, I went to Barcelona, Spain. I attended the Mobile World Congress of the mobile telephone industry. And, man, I got an education when I got there. The buzzwords were global brain, artificial intelligence, and blockchain technology. Those were the three topics that the phone industry was talking about the most. Well, autonomous cars, smart cities, and such. China has a growing involvement in blockchain technology. Where is China going with it?
I'm not sure, but I've got some inklings from colleagues that China might do a gold backing of its RMB currency enforced by blockchain. And anytime China has an idea or a plan to oppose the dollar using gold, they better have it well fortified.
Okay, so that leads us kind of along the line where I'm thinking, is China going to announce a gold-backed digital currency?
I think they will, Rick. And the more we continue throwing our military weight around, in addition to making ridiculous claims like Iran was involved in support of the 9/11 terrorism event, and therefore their foreign assets will be frozen and confiscated, that's nothing more than propaganda justified asset thefts. As long as we do these fraudulent banking acts, along with SWIFT blockades, sanctions enforced by SWIFT, and the military actions under false pretenses, Casa Belli that are all false, ignoring our own intelligence reports regarding, the Syrian gassing incident. That was done by the Saudis and the Israelis, blamed on Assad, the president or king, whatever you want to call him, of Syria. The Saudis and the Israelis did that, and all the videos are falsified. I've got contacts with European independent press that say that after the videos were recorded for ISIS purposes, all the dead bodies under the sheets got up and walked away. And the ones who put on the white helmets put away their white helmets and put back on their black scarves and went out in their marauding schemes as usual. And all the little babies with their little gas masks that look so cute and so sad, well, none of the little babies had blood coming out of their eyes, ears, mouths, nor skin eruptions, so none of them were nerve gas victims. How dumb do they think we are? I'll tell you how dumb. They think we're very dumb, and they're very correct.
It's obvious, Jim.
Yes.
Most of the public believes this stuff.
Right. I had Latino friends, about 5 of them, come up to me and say, why did America gas those children? And I said, are you aware of any of the effects of nerve gas? And they say no. So I said, sangre de la nariz, sangre de los ojos, sangre de las bocas y erupciones en el piel. ¿Tú viste esta? No. Entonces no es ataque de nervios. Okay, that's a little Spanish. I told them that there was no bleeding from the eyes, nose, or mouth, no eruptions of the skin. They were not gas victims. And they say, wait a minute, you mean the press was all false? I said, the press is always false. I've been telling you this now for the last 3 years. When are you going to start to believe me? Did you hear before the election results that Hillary had a big lead? Oh, yeah. I was surprised she didn't win. I said, that's because they stopped the election fraud and you had been lied to all the way up to the election. And then they finally go, my gosh, is all the news false? And I said, yeah, especially the one you watch, CNN. And they go, my gosh, what should I watch? I said, don't watch any news. You got to read the news. And then I went on to explain to them, do not have your little baby given 30 to 50 vaccines unless you want the baby to have a nice, short, sick life.
Jim, speaking about the election polls, France goes to the polls this Sunday, and the establishment news media is telling the French voters that Macron has a 24-point lead over Marine Le Pen. And so they've been promoting this guy, Macron, as a centrist, yet he's a socialist who worked for Rothschilds.
Yeah, more lies. I mean, what's new about this? I have a couple of discussions going on with some French clients, and I asked them, do you have any polling centers that are not official and tightly aligned with the government? And they say, well, not really. There are a number of smaller ones, but, just related to some kind of a magazine or some kind of a smartphone product or something like that. And I say, okay. In other words, all your major polls are falsified, just like in the United States. And I said, we were told that Hillary had a 3, 5, 10, 12-point lead, and now you're being told Macron has a 20-point lead. So do you think you're being lied to again? And they say, well, yeah, I think probably we are being lied to. Okay, then I say, well, the next big factor that must be brought into the equation is, will the weak support for the fascist Macron, let's just call him Macron, okay? so people know what I'm talking about. Macron, I don't think translates very well in people's ears. But I actually was a French student in high school. I got an award, Rick. I got the French award my junior year in high school for French. It was out of 200 kids. So, je parle français. Okay, but I think the big issue, the big factor now coming into play is, will the support for Macron be weak so they don't show up to vote in big numbers? And on the other side, will the support mechanisms for Le Pen be so strong that they show up in gigantic numbers? So it doesn't really matter what the percentage of the population has support for. It matters who turns out to vote. Now, the same sort of thing happened for Hillary. A lot of people were saying, well, I like Hillary, but they didn't vote. A lot of them just didn't vote. And the anti-establishment vote came out in huge numbers for Trump. Now, whether or not they're betrayed, another issue. They wanted to get out to vote against the neocons, against the banker cabal, against the established government, and against the constant war. And I think we're going to see a similar event in France. I just don't know. You know, here's an important point. Le Pen does not have to win. Let me back up. In the runoff, it's just two of them. It's Macron versus Le Pen.
Yeah, she's got to get 50.1% of the vote this Sunday.
Yeah, I know.
Are there any legitimate elections remaining anywhere in the West?
I would say emphatically no. We got a good taste of it with the Scottish independence. We got really good inklings with Bush 2 in 2000. The Clintons, I don't think they really needed to defraud the vote because Clinton had the personality and was good looking and therefore won the women's vote. I'm sorry, I really don't think women should have the right to vote in U.S. presidential elections when they really just are voting for a good-looking man. I know that's a very controversial thing to say, but I'm a statistician, and I've read political science reports on regression analysis, and the number one factor for every president since Kennedy in winning has been the women vote. Therefore, you don't have an ugly man candidate.
I have read reports that no Democrat could have won the presidency, basically in the last 100 years since the women's suffrage rights movement, that it's always been the women's vote that has swayed the election toward a liberal socialist Democrat.
You use the word sway. I would prefer to say control. John Kennedy won something like 85 or 88% of the women vote. What are they voting for? Were they voting to stop the Fed? Were they voting against Vietnam War promulgation? Or were they voting for one hell of a good-looking guy? I mean, turn it around. If they were mainly women running for president, it would be the exact same opposite. That's a beautiful woman. I'm voting for her, boy. But we need some sexy woman in the White House. Yeah, Joe Sixpack would be all over that. In fact, you got a little taste of that when you heard about, what a joy it is to get rid of Michael out of the White House as wife of Obama and bring in Ivanka. Ivan, what's the wife's name? It's not the same. Ivania?
Melania.
Melania. Oh, what a nice improvement that is. Okay, well, bring that into a gender vote and you got the same twisted controlling mechanism.
Maybe 2020 will be Melania versus Michelle.
Oh gosh, maybe it'll be Zuckerberg.
Hey, that's a real possibility. He's talking about it. He's making moves.
I know. I hope he slips on a staircase and breaks his neck.
How do you feel about him, Jim?
I think he's nothing more than Rockefeller privileged scum. And Facebook did not qualify for S&P 500 index inclusion because it didn't have a tangible product and didn't have a 10 to 15-year history. So why is it included? To lift its value for a Rockefeller boy. It's so dirty. There's nothing left in the United States that's clean anymore when big money is involved. Nothing. You can even go to the charity organizations. What is United Way? 96% overhead? What is the Heart Fund? Over 90% overhead costs? These leaders are driving limousines and Mercedes and huge incomes, and only 4 to 10 cents on the dollar ends up going for the charity usage. The entire U.S. is contaminated by fraud, and I think it's accelerated since 9/11 when they began instituting and integrating the whole ugly fascist business model that I've been talking about for the last 10 years.
So, Jim, if this trend continues and there's no uprising among the public to chase out the criminals and clean up the system, is this going to be a gradual decline into decadence over the next several decades, or is there a tipping point where the thing just implodes?
There's a tipping point where it explodes. And the tipping point comes when the United States cannot any longer supply its economy with the supply chain using the dollar. They'll need a new dollar. I'm calling it the dollar. It's going to be devalued heavily, and it's going to have some form of backing, or else the United States is going to lose $1 trillion of its internal assets every year to its creditors.
Maybe they could back it with heroin.
That's a good point, Rick. I hadn't thought of that, but we'd have to give up our heroin in that case, and I don't think we're willing. I think we're much more willing to back it up with, say, office buildings and oil reserves and maybe the Grand Canyon for its gold. But whatever we back the new dollar with, we lose. And just to give you some, I might have mentioned this example before, but suppose we back our new dollar with oil and gas. Well, the strategic petroleum oil reserve is worth approximately $7 billion. Our trade deficit is $500 billion a year. So 70 strategic petroleum reserves each year would be lost. If you translate it to gold and just focus on a nice $1,300 gold price, the $550 billion annual trade deficit translates to 13,000 tons of gold. So we're set to lose at least 10,000 tons of gold every year from a trade deficit because, why? We ruined our country by shipping out our industry, outsourcing. I remember way back in the 80s talking to friends of mine at Digital Equipment Corporation. Intel started outsourcing to the Pacific Rim. And then a couple of years later, we saw more industries, more than just technology industries. A lot more were shipping out to the Pacific Rim. And I said, golly, John, if you just fast forward 20 years, we're going to have some very serious bankruptcies. And he said, you watch them do their asset bubble trick. I said, yeah, that's not going to work. You do a couple cycles of that, it's going to blow up. So we outsourced our industry, dependent on asset bubbles, stock, housing, now treasury bonds, and they all bust. Well, when the last one busts, namely the treasury bonds, you have to do away with the dollar because that's the foundation for the dollar. And that's where we're heading. We're going to get a dollar currency crisis. That's going to be the tipping point. It's going to be tremendous shortages inside the United States because outside the United States, except for parts of, Western Europe and maybe some South American locales, they're going to say we don't want to be paid in treasury bills any longer. for your container vessels, for your oil, for whatever, for your import supply. And that's the tipping point. Then you're going to get the imported price inflation and the shortages and the riots. I've been saying this for 3 years, Rick, and we're getting very precariously close.
Hey, Jim, what do you make of Saudi Aramco's takeover of the Port Arthur, Texas oil refinery?
Well, they're trying to guarantee a buyer for their oil, are they not?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're trying to sell Aramco, but Aramco is buying Texas oil refineries.
Yeah, well, we haven't seen any sale of Aramco yet because the price is 10 times wrong. There have been a few analyses out there of, say, companies like Exxon, Royal Dutch Shell, a few others, and they compare that with Aramco's supposed value that's put on paper, and then they do the division on the number of shares that are created and then the number of shares that are floated. It's the Aramco float has a wrong price by tenfold. I don't think you're going to see jack sold in the open market in an Aramco IPO. I don't think they're going to sell anything because the analysis process is actually quite competent. You make a comparison based on similar companies. ExxonMobil is very similar. They own petrochemical complexes. They own gas stations out the yin yang. They've got deposits and claims and rights and on deposits. This is not really complex. And the fly in the Aramco ointment is very simple and very ugly. Very ugly. They lie by a factor of, I think, 3 to 5 on what they have for existing reserves. If they wanted to be more honest, they would say, we intend to capture the Yemen reserves, and we're going to count that as part of Aramco.
Hey, Jim, when I was in Barcelona, one of the most impressive speakers that I heard was the billionaire Masayoshi Son. He's the owner of SoftBank, and he announced on stage that day a $100 billion technology fund, primarily for artificial intelligence. And it makes you sit up in the chair. Somebody's standing on stage saying, I have a $100 billion investment fund. So when I got back to the States, I did some research on it, and I discovered that he got the $100 billion from the Saudis. And that the Saudis are buying up American intel companies.
Well, they're trying to do something before they get out of town. So if they have some business interests after they abandon their kingdom, and it's no longer called the Saudi, what do you call it? I'm sorry, I can't. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, so they're cashing out dollars and buying hard assets.
Right.
But they're going after artificial intelligence technology firms.
Well, I don't know how many there are. Is it more than one or two?
Isn't it like an oxymoron to put Saudi Arabia and intelligence in the same sentence? I mean, can you imagine an artificial intelligence system funded by the Saudis?
Well, it is an oxymoron unless you're having the Germans being hired by the Saudis to run it.
Imagine a global brain, which is what they were talking about in Barcelona, that is programmed with Sharia law.
Well, I think it would probably commit suicide in order to have the bowl of 70 ripe grapes waiting for them in paradise. I wouldn't, okay, I am so sick of the Muslim culture. I am so sick of the Arab monarchies. They're nothing but gigantic fascist states.
Islamic countries are the scourge of the planet. There is nothing good in them. You can't name one positive contribution to human civilization that has come from a Muslim country.
Well, they developed algebra and astronomy, but I'm afraid that was over 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, but nothing's happened since.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to be called a racist, but, I study their culture, I study their religion, and it's the only religion that has a deep, raging hatred for knowledge. They burn libraries. I keep coming back to this. They cannot make aspirins. They cannot make shoes. They cannot make their own underwear. And my joke is, therefore, they don't wear any underwear, nor do they bathe their nether parts. I have no respect for the Arab Muslim cultures, and I am anxious and eager in the anticipation of the fall of the Saudi kingdom. I want to see 20 to 50 princes lose their heads. They're thieves. They're criminals. And they got outsmarted by the Americans and British for signing on to this Arab petro surplus recycling plan that resulted in the theft of $3 to $5 trillion of Saudi reserves. It's in the Exchange Stabilization Fund run by the U.S. Department of Treasury that is the core system behind the derivatives that manage the dollar and the Treasury bonds. We're not going to let them claim it. And I think that was part of the agreement. But the Saudis who signed it in 73 and 75, from what I'm told, may have thought, well, we're not going to worry about 40 years from now. 40 years from now is now. 40 years from then is now. And we're stealing $3 to $5 trillion in their treasury bonds. So they're trying to, spread it around. They've got a huge amount of California and London and Western European Spanish properties. It's a huge amount. And Swiss properties. And, they're trying to cooperate with the United States by making sure that a good deal of that siphoned money and wealth from reserves goes to fund ISIS. And they're being revealed. Putin had last September the, what do they call it, the G7 meeting, because we don't have G8 anymore. Russia got booted out. It's so funny. Like a bunch of immature children. We're going to boot out the Russians because they're bad. They're bullies. Oh boy, what incredible stupidity. But Putin had a PowerPoint presentation show as a preliminary sideshow when he was not invited to the show for all the different principals to show up and take a look at all the funding through New York, Israel, and Swiss banks for the ISIS funds. Oh my gosh.
And that didn't get any news coverage in the West, did it?
I got a little bit in the alt news, but not in the
alt news, but not the establishment news media at all.
There was actually something in the major mainstream news from the most recent. I think it was February Davos economic meeting, which was not about economics at all. It's the Davos banker barbecue with in the back rooms you had the pedophiles, little kids and young girls and boys showed up. I don't know how many were killed, but that's not my job to count how many were murdered by the bankers. Anyway, Alibaba CEO Jack Ma was given an invitation. It's one of the side effects from the fact that China is now a funding member of the IMF. That got him an invitation. So he took the podium and made an outrageous true comment. I'm saying outrageous because it caused rage, but he made a true comment that the United States has spent $25 trillion in defense spending since the Vietnam War. What do we have to show for it? Besides a crumbling infrastructure. Great point by Jack Ma of Alibaba.
That's right.
By the way, Alibaba is going to be a very big player. They're going to start competing against Amazon before long.
Hey, Jim, tell our audience how they can get the newsletter. I get it every month. It comes out in two parts, the global money war and then the gold and currency report. The last ones came out April 21st and April 23rd. So you're getting pretty close to releasing the next one for May. How can people subscribe to the Hat Trick Letter?
Well, it's goldenjackass.com, www.goldenjackass.com. It has a free area, public domain page, and it's called Main. And that's where I keep links to public articles and interviews like this. So I invite people who are not very experienced in these matters to bounce around and review, and then after a while sign up for the newsletter. But I also invite people who are very familiar, sign up for the newsletter. I got to say this, Rick, every time we do an interview, I get a good response of new orders. You've got a very smart audience, and I give you guys credit.
Thank you.
I praise your followers. There are 2 or 3 or 4 different hosts who I get decent responses with new orders, and they're more than a handful that I do not. And I try to focus on the ones where I get new orders because I'm running a business. But what it means, it goes hand in hand with being intelligent, well aware, informed, not easily duped, not gullible. And that is the True News crowd.
Yes, sir.
But I invite people who are well schooled in some of these matters to sign up for the Hat Trick Letter, which has a home on goldenjackass.com. And those might wonder why you call yourself a golden jackass. Well, my mother called me my little jackass. I was insolent at a very young age. I caused a lot of problems in school.
I can't imagine it. I just can't even fathom that you were like that.
Well, let me tell you one little funny fact. It became evident around 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, high school. I was near the lead of the class, but I was also the most disciplined. I mean, like Mr. I'm not going to say my last name, but okay, Mr. Willie. My name is not Willie. I got a real name. I got on a birth certificate and passport. I got a name like everybody. It's not Willie. But I would be told by a nun or another teacher, a Christian brother, Mr. Willie, you will stay after school. Okay, fine. And what did they have me do? I had to square numbers. 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16. Keep on going. 25 squared is 625. 26 squared, not so clear. Wow. Welcome to San Jose, Costa Rica.
Slow down, Jim. Slow down.
One of the loudest, noisiest cities I've ever seen in my life. Anyway, I got disciplined a lot, Rick. I had to stay after school a lot. I got paddled a lot. I broke down and cried for a couple paddling. And they paddle hard. When you're only 12 years old, 11 years old, you get your backside paddled 12 times. You have trouble sitting down for a couple hours. But I was near the lead of the class. It was always Adele Iman, me, Robert Conway. And it's funny how you remember these names, but in high school it was a much tougher crowd in high school. But I finished in the top 10 out of 400 kids in high school. It was fun, a lot of work, a lot of fun. But, I used to do things like in AP chemistry, senior year of high school, point out to, oh gosh, what was his name? I can't remember, some Christian brother. Anyway, I used to say, brother, you got a mistake there. I think you mean you need a minus sign over there on the upper right, by the 2. And he'd say, oh, Mr. Willie, thank you. It's so nice to have you in the crowd. And I'd say, well, we don't want to miseducate all these kids. Okay, I was insolent from a young age, therefore the golden jackass, because I focused on gold. And I noticed in 2003 when I started writing public articles that, wow, Wall Street does not comprehend gold. Woo! Why did gold get off the brown bottom in 2002 and 3? It wasn't from the Arab and Palestinian problem. What stupidity. No. It was over the low interest rate being below the inflation rate. So we had negative real interest rates. Oh boy. So I was the golden jackass, and I still am, and I'm proud of it. And no, this is a labor of love, Rick, and it's a lot of work. And I admit that I get a little worn down. This is a long, tough battle. And just when you think there's going to be a global currency reset, like in January of 2014,
Jim, you know why
we get a Ukraine war.
Jim, you know why we get worn down? I mean, I suffer the same thing. Is because for us to do our job, which is to monitor and analyze what's taking place in the world and report it to the people in a way they understand, we have to study the thinking, the actions, the strategies, the schemes of psychopaths, of people who are demented, satanic, Luciferian, just the worst that you can imagine. And it's very difficult for the public to comprehend what we're dealing with in the world right now, because the average person doesn't think this way. But it takes a toll on guys like you and me, because we're spending so much time, and you come to the conclusion that the Western world is run by very wicked people. There's no other conclusion you can arrive at other than these people are wicked.
I know. And the more wicked they are, the more difficult it is for nice people to believe. My brother actually said to me 2 years ago, Rick, I don't really believe that there are Satanists. Isn't that just sort of a weird theme in books and movies for entertainment? And I said, you don't realize that the Rockefellers are Satanists? You don't realize that central bankers are largely Satanists? Wall Street bankers are Satanists? You don't realize that many politicians at the top are Satanists? You don't understand any of that, John? And he said, oh, I don't know about that, Jim. I think you're exaggerating. And I said, well, why do you think we have world wars to settle financial problems? Oh, I don't know. I guess it's the human nature. I said, no, it's not human nature. I said, why do you think we get the Battle of the Midway with Peter Fonda showing up in the news right after 9/11? I mean, not the news, on TV, movie channels. He said, well, because I think people are thinking about war. I said, no, they're told to think about war. This is programming. He said, well, I don't see it the way you do. I said, I know. You don't believe there are any Satanists out there, but I got a few clients who walked in on satanic ritual meetings because they showed up at their own meeting too early in the morning in Alberta, Canada. He said, really? I mean, it's dealing with gullible people and dumb people. That wears me down,
yes,
in addition to dealing with wicked people, as you described.
Yeah, Jim, among your sources around the world who are deeply connected to the banking world, are you detecting a growing awareness among them that we're dealing with satanic people that are wicked? Is there a growing awareness among your sources that is at the root of this problem?
No.
Really?
They're noticing that there is more exposure of a very small, sick group of politicians. They don't think it's widespread at all. I'll say this as a closing remark, Rick. I believe the pedophilia is largely controlled, like 90% controlled, by Rockefellers, Kissinger, Mossad, and Langley, that controls at least half of our Congress and judicial system, and is the biggest story of the century, and enables Israel to control our government like on puppet strings. Remember the anthrax stories, the anthrax threat to the congressional ventilation system right before the Patriot Act vote. This is how they operate. Remember the Homeland Security minor officers who were arrested for pedophilia on their computers that they did not even know about. Now WikiLeaks reveals that Langley can put child pornography on your computer without you even knowing about it.
And the FBI director said the other day that no charges will be filed against Anthony Weiner.
Well, I think he's flipped. He's turned state's evidence. I think there are stories, and I can't verify much, that he's in the witness protection program, and so is his wife, that gay friend of Hillary's.
Uma Abedin.
Yes. I think we might, they're probably going to kill Weiner, but you're not going to hear about it.
You think they'll roast him?
I don't know. I think, I don't know. I don't want to get really lurid on your show.
All right, we won't go there. All right, Jim Willie, publisher of the Hat Trick Letter. You can subscribe at goldenjackass.com. Always enjoy talking to you, Jim. God bless. We'll see you the next time.
Okay. I hope I don't see you on the other side. No, the other side is the other side of the launch of the gold standard, so I will see you on the other side.
That's right. That's right.
Above ground.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Okay, good.
Well, as always, you never know what you're going to get when you call Jim Willie. And today was no exception to the rule. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. We covered a lot of ground, everything from the Queen Lizard to China's gold and Bitcoin and artificial intelligence. Hey, we appreciate you listening to True News, and we appreciate your prayers and your financial support and your evangelistic effort to tell others about True News. This is how we grow, by our audience, our supporters, sharing the link to True News, telling your friends about the True News app, the website, however you are finding True News, whether it's on Spreaker or YouTube or whatever. Tell people about True News and help us grow. This has been a phenomenal year already in 2017, and we are growing bigger and wider than we've ever been. And our anniversary is coming up. This is May is our anniversary month, May 24, 1999, the first day that I walked into a radio studio and did the very first broadcast. So for me, it's always an important day because God changed my life with that first radio broadcast. I had no idea that this many years later, I would still be here talking about what's happening in the world, calling people to repentance, preparing people for the second coming of Jesus Christ. I really, truly thought back then in 99, this is a short assignment. I had this great burden on me from the Lord, and I thought, I'll do it. I just got to get out there and do it and get it over with quickly. I thought, well, this will probably last 6 months or so, and the Lord had a different plan for me. And so whenever you surrender your life to the Lord, and tell him, I will follow you. I will do what you want me to do. You better be prepared that you're going to go in a totally different direction than you ever imagined. But it's been rewarding, and I'm so glad that I went this direction. So glad the Lord took me here and that I surrendered, that I went there. I've met so many wonderful people, and I have a huge family around the world, the True News audience, and you are family all over the world. And you pray for Susan and me. You pray for our family. A lot of you have known my family. It's like you've been listening to True News since 1999. I'm always amazed to get emails and letters from longtime listeners who tell me that they started listening to True News in 1999. They've been with us the whole time, and they know all the ups and downs. They know about my family. They know about our children, going to college, getting married, having children. They've been with us just like family through almost 2 decades, and that is such an honor. It's a blessing, and I thank God every day for all of you who support us so kindly. You can show your support at truenews.com. TRUNEWS, truenews.com. Click donate and give the very best gift that you can give. And if you use PayPal, it is support@truenews.com. And if you want to send a check or money order or precious metals, Then the address is Post Office Box 690069 in Vero Beach, Florida. The zip code is 32969. Again, P.O. Box 690069, Vero Beach, Florida 32969. Your support is the only source of revenue we have. We rely totally on the audience. No gimmicks, no fundraising efforts. It's simply reminding the audience that we are supported by the love gifts of the people who listen to the program. And we are very, very grateful. God bless. Hey, we will see you on Monday.